So, the monkey's paw, the wish gone wrong, a trope we're all very well aware of. But you see, recently I made a video covering a connection I found between the movie Obsession and an episode of Supernatural. And in that video, I made a statement. But I remember while watching Obsession, I said, this concept has never been done before. I believe that the statement got a little bit misunderstood, where people thought I wasn't aware of the 1902 original story, The Monkey's Paw, and a lot of the subsequent sequels that came after it. And trust me, you guys definitely reminded me that aptly that I did not mention that in my video, because I got many comments recommending different episodes of television that follow a similar premise of a wish gone wrong or the monkey's paw trope. So today we're going to look at 9 different episodes of TV that you guys recommended in the comments, and I'm going to compare the plots, see where they are similar, where they differ, and ultimately, who do I think did the plot best? We're going to stack them up against the 2 examples I've already put on the channel, and then add all of these new examples. In this video, we'll be covering shows such as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Fairly Odd Parents, The Simpsons, which is the episode that Curry Barker claims did actually influence Obsession, Tales from the Crypt, My Babysitter's a Vampire, Twilight Zone, Rick and Morty, X-Files, and Charmed. So if you're a fan of any of those shows, stay tuned. And with that being said, let's get into the first one, being Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So, I just got done watching Season 2, Episode 16 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Betwitched, Bothered, and Bewildered. So the first thing I have to say about this before anything else, this is a show that got recommended a lot to me, and I see why. It's a really good show, even from the episode I just watched, and it's one that I'm definitely going to have to go back and watch from the very beginning and watch further than I just saw right there. So essentially, the whole point of this story, it starts out, we find out Cordelia and Xander are together, which I assume was probably established before that, but again, this is my first time watching this show specifically. It's a Valentine's Day setting, which adds a little bit of a unique thing to this specific story we got going on here. One thing I noticed really early on, not really related to this, but Buffy fighting the vampires is badass. First time I seen that, so yeah, Michelle Gellar just like doing kung fu moves and shit. That was awesome. So essentially, early on, we see the Mean Girls are bullying Cordelia about being with Xander. These girls that I don't know any of their names, but they remind me of the Mean Girls, so that's what they're going to be called in this segment. So we find out Buffy has had a bad breakup recently, which kind of leads into a side plot of this episode that I found interesting, because much like a lot of these episodes and the Supernatural episode, the spell gone wrong, wish gone wrong is not the only aspect, but it is like the main point of it. And so when they're in class, Xander sees a girl named Amy seemingly entrance their teacher and trick her into just loving the paper that she gives her. Also, Buffy is Daphne from the live action Scooby-Doo, which again, never see the show, so I found that really dope. And we find out Buffy is in danger from her ex, Angel, which is a vampire, which I found out through watching this episode. So that's kind of the side plot, is on Valentine's Day, this guy normally does like terrible acts to people, and Buffy is his ex-girlfriend. So she is seemingly in danger, and we find that out from Giles. Also, Seth Green is in this, which gotta love Seth Green. Idle Hands is an all-time movie. Shout out that if you haven't seen it, kind of niche reference there. Xander tells Cordelia that they may only have lust, and then they end up essentially breaking up, but Xander gives her a necklace, but he gets really upset because he wasn't expecting it to go that way. Although, if you walk up to a girl and say what he said, I mean, he did say they could still love each other, but he was also like, we may just have teenage lust. I don't know if this is really working out. So honestly, I can't really blame Shorty for doing that. I would have probably done the same thing, bro. And then Xander is teased for getting dumped. Like, he's walking through the hallways and everybody's, girls and guys are both teasing him about getting dumped by Cordelia. And then Xander finds Amy and essentially blackmails her into casting a spell, and it's a love spell. And his plan is he wants to make Cordelia love him so that he can break her heart. Because he's like, I'm not even broke up with, I'm breaking up with you. And so Amy doesn't want to do it because she said the spell needs pure intention. A love spell should not be casted out of the reason that he wants to do it, which is revenge. But she ends up doing it anyway. But essentially, Cordelia, we find out, is still wearing the necklace that she was given by Xander. So she does still care about him. So it kind of makes you as the audience member be like, man, why are you even doing this? I feel like this was salvageable without getting a spell casted, but that's what he decides to do. So then the spell is casted, and we see that the spell doesn't work on Cordelia when he comes to school the next day, which is very odd to him, obviously, because that's the only person it was meant to work on. But then he goes to talk to Buffy and realizes that the spell actually hit her. Which, I mean, it's pretty obvious here that Xander does kind of like Buffy, or did at one time, but he doesn't want it to be this way. But, at first he's kind of thinking, oh, this spell might be good. But then he finds out that Amy also got hit by the spell because she says the same shit that Buffy said to him, meaning that they both are in mad love with the man. And so then he goes home to try to escape it, but there's a girl in his bed. I didn't quite catch her name. I'm sure they said it a few times, but she tries to seduce him, which he ends up running away and hitting a hell no on that. And then the mean girls are shown to now not like Cordelia because they love Xander, whereas earlier in the episode, they were telling her that she shouldn't be with him, and that's why they didn't like him. So it's like this wish or this spell is what it is, not a wish here or like a magic item. It definitely has some bad consequences, that's for damn sure. Because every girl in school is shown to now love Xander. Like, they're kind of creepily all looking at him to the side as he's walking into school. And that's really the biggest consequence, is that he made every woman in the human population, other than Cordelia, the one he meant to strike with the spell, got hit by this. So it just completely backfires. And Xander goes and tells Giles about it, which is a teacher, librarian, something like that. But he's a really cool character too. But he tells him how stupid he was. Like Giles tells Xander, you're very dumb. No spell like this should have ever been casted. Xander tries to hide in the library, but then Buffy and Amy find him. And Buffy tries to seduce him as well, but then Amy comes in and fights her, like punches her, and then she proceeds to cast a spell on Buffy and turn her into a rat, which was another little side plot of this. At this point in the episode, they had kind of forgotten a little bit about the side plot of Buffy's ex coming after her, but that does come back a little bit later. The black eyes in this remind me a lot of Supernatural, so I do kind of get where people are coming from, saying that Buffy actually influenced Supernatural, much like Supernatural might have influenced Obsession. So then we see the mean girls like physically attack Cordelia, which is fucking wild. Seth Green whoops Xander, like he just fucking whops in one good time. Cordelia's necklace actually saved her from being hit with the spell, we find out, which is a cool little detail there. It ramps up because the girl from the bed when he went home actually has an axe outside the school now and wants to kill him if she can't have him, because essentially he goes and saves Cordelia from the mean girls, and they go outside and there's a mob with this girl spearheading it with an axe, trying to now kill him because he doesn't love her back. And then Xander and Cordelia run to Buffy's house. Even her mom loves him, which is crazy. Buffy's mom goes apeshit and breaks into her own house. Angel snatches Xander through a window when they try to go run upside, so that's where he ends up coming back. And even the female vampire loves Xander and ends up saving him from Angel. So I found that to be crazy. It's like the spell worked on not only humans, but also the monster women, which is crazy. Xander is almost bit by her until the mob shows up, and it just disrupts everything, sends us into what you would call the final act if this were a movie. And the mob chases Xander and Cordelia with weapons through Buffy's house, and then they end up in the basement. Cordelia actually finds it sweet that the spell was for her, but obviously she still finds it kind of crazy. The spell ends up getting undone by Amy and Giles, and all the women return to normal. Xander learns a good lesson that maybe it's better to be unpopular than everyone obsess over him. And then in the end, Cordelia still defends Xander from the mean girls and decides to go back to him. So yeah, overall, I don't really think this episode was super similar to either of the ones I've covered before, but I really enjoyed this episode of television. It's a really good contender for the first one here of best plot, like best one to do it out of all the shows. So I'm very interested to see how our next one stacks up on the list, because next up here we have Fairly Odd Parents season 4 episode 18, just the two of us. So I'm about to go watch that, and yeah, I'll tell y'all what I think. Well, for starters with this one, when I was doing my research, for some reason it said season 4 episode 19, but there's actually only 18 episodes in season 4 of Fairly Odd Parents, so not really sure where the hell that came from. But it's actually season 4 episode 13, more specifically the second half of it, because it's actually a double episode, which I didn't realize. And the first part of the episode really has no relation to the premise of this video other than it involving a wish, as pretty much every episode of Fairly Odd Parents does. But I briefly just wanted to talk about it a little bit because it's kind of funny. Essentially, Timmy's parents don't have any adult friends, so he wishes that they will. And then Cosmo and Wanda get stuck with that responsibility. And then he's tortured by his babysitter, Vicky, as always, in some pretty hilarious ways. And then he ends up throwing a kick-ass party that actually makes the neighbors like Timmy's parents, even though they didn't before. So, pretty cool start to the episode. But to the part that actually matters here. So, it starts off, they're ice skating. Timmy is without a date at the ice skating rink. But Trixie's there, so he thinks about going up to her and asking her to skate with him. But every guy comes after Trixie in the skating rink, and Timmy's just pissed about it. Because obviously that's the girl that he's always liked, but he's always been rejected by her, so he's like, well, today's my chance. Timmy wishes to be the only one in school, like the only boy in school. Cosmo and Wanda warn against it, but they still grant it. And, you know, he's about to go up to Trixie again. And then a Frenchman shows up and causes him to wish he is the only boy in the world. So essentially all the people get poofed just like that. And then an alien shows up pretty comically, and he has to wish that he is the only, that him and Trixie are the only people on the earth in general. So I found that to be crazy, because I understand Timmy's a child, but you got to understand the implications of that could go really bad, which obviously is a kid's show, but they still do go pretty bad. I will say they go pretty bad, because it shows the earth empty, it shows everybody getting poofed, and then Timmy comes to talk to Trixie, but then Trixie runs off the adoration of other people, the infatuation of people with her, which I think is the main, like, I guess that's the main plot device here that's a little bit unique versus the other stories, is Trixie already in her normal form runs off the adoration of other people. She loves to be loved. She wants all the attention in the world. Essentially, all this wish did for her, it didn't turn her into something else. It kept her essentially the same person, but now she only has Timmy to show her the love, which is like a really scary concept. Like, I wouldn't want to be in that situation. Could you imagine if Bear and Nikki were the only people in the whole world in Obsession? That would have been insane. But it is pretty similar, actually, to Obsession in a couple ways, which I'll get into in a second. Because at first it seems to be going okay, but then, you know, she starts acting crazy. Like, she's acting crazy from the beginning, but at first they're doing activities together, and Timmy seems to actually be loving it. He even at one point claims he'll never undo the wish. Then she quickly turns insane as soon as he's not giving her attention. Like, he goes to the bathroom, and she just absolutely flips out about it because she needs that constant attention. And then Timmy realizes the issue, but then he tries to unwish it, and Cosmo scoops Wanda up because there's a side plot been brewing with them where Cosmo thinks that Wanda's wanting to leave him even though they've been together 5,000 years, which fun little side plot going on with that. But so Timmy tries to break up with Trixie, and it doesn't go very well, as you could imagine. She comes after Timmy with a fucking lawnmower, which is something I don't think we're going to see in any of these other episodes because most of them aren't animated, and that would just be very much more random in a live action show. Because even after that, she launches baseballs at him and comes after him with a helicopter. And at one point she says that him saying she's pretty is not enough anymore, because throughout this whole thing he's been having to tell her she's pretty like 1,000,000 times, but she said it's not enough anymore, which is another thing that I think has a deeper meaning, because it's like a lot of times we try to do things for people to please them, and then it's like it ends up not being enough, and Sometimes people get obsessive over it, trying to figure out what is enough, and sometimes you just can't be enough for people. You know what I mean? Like that's just really the truth of it. I think this episode, even being a kid's show, that's a good message to take from it as an adult. You know what I mean? You can't always please everybody. Sometimes things just aren't meant to be, and you shouldn't force them. I tell my homies that all the time. But so essentially, Timmy wishes it back to normal, and people return. Everything goes back to normal at the end of the episode. Trixie gets her people back to adore her. We see she's back in school with everybody around her. And the message is pretty clear that Timmy has to find real chemistry, as Wanda tells Cosmo at the end of the episode. So as far as being similar to Obsession, like I said, the pacing, I guess, of like that plot part of the story, it kind of starts out showing them doing activities together. It's going all right. And then she quickly turns insane. I don't really... It being an animated show, I can't really speak to like any cinematography aspects being similar, or, the plot obviously is pretty different given that this is fairy godparents granting a wish, and it's somebody that is essentially the same person regardless, but just put in a situation where she goes crazy, versus obviously Obsession being what it is. I've already done a review and another video about that, so I'm not gonna go into it here. But yeah, as far as where it ranks against the other ones I've seen so far, I mean, this was pretty bare bones, what I expected from it. There's nothing really too crazy, obviously, other than the comedy of Fairly Odd Parents, that novelty of that. But other than that, I would still say, I think I like the Buffy episode quite a bit better, which it may not be fair to compare them to, but we still got 7 more episodes to get through, so yeah, let's just get to it. And come on down, our next contestant on the Trope is Right is the one that is supposedly the one that actually influenced Obsession, the one that Curry Barker has publicly stated he drew the idea for the One Wish Willow from the Monkey's Paw, which technically comes from the short story released in 1902 and not The Simpsons, but you get the point. Influence can come from things later, even if it used a previous concept. But essentially, this is actually a lot shorter than I remembered it being, because I've seen this before. It's just been many years. This is Season 2, Episode 1 of the Treehouse of Horrors Simpsons episodes. At least that's how it is when you search it on Prime Video. I'm not exactly sure how it's listed on other services. I know it's also on Disney+. Not gonna lie, for this one, I only watched it on YouTube because I just couldn't be asked to buy it because they don't have it available for normal streaming, and your boy don't do Disney+. So with that being said, let's get into it. There's not much to say about this, but it's a cool episode. The Monkey's Paw is bought by Homer. He's in a different country, and he buys it from like a man at a bazaar, essentially like a shop. And he warns him not to buy it, but of course Homer, being the dumbass he is, he buys it, and then Maggie gets a hold of it, the baby, and she wishes for a pacifier, as a baby would, and the pacifier shows up, much to Homer's begrudge. But they're quickly seated at a restaurant due to the Monkey's Paw as well, as we're seeing. They're just seated, and they're like, oh, the Simpsons. And then Lisa wishes for world peace, which is where we see like the huge, like, I guess, bad outcome of this episode. Like the Monkey's Paw turning bad is when she wishes for world peace and we see everybody throwing their weapons away. But then the aliens think it would be a prime time to invade Earth now because we're defenseless. So the aliens come down to Earth and essentially try to do a hostile takeover. And, the Simpsons and everybody else essentially get, like, trapped in their houses, or some of them, like Moe, are fighting the aliens, or running from them at first and then fighting them. But essentially, yeah, the aliens are trying to take over. The Simpsons get trapped in their house. Homer, like a dumbass, is still using the paw. He asks for an enchanted sandwich, essentially, like this big floating sandwich. And nothing actually goes bad with that, but it kind of shows the humor of Homer Simpson, because he thinks it's the worst thing in the world because the turkey's dry, and he marks that up to the paw being the most evil object in the world. So that finally made him realize it, but not the aliens coming to probe everybody. Found that pretty interesting. So then Homer eventually gives the paw to Flanders because he's just tired of it. And Flanders wishes the aliens away, which works, and they leave. And the funny part is, after that, the Paw seems to just be fine, which, as we know, it's never like that. But this is an anthology where it's not the normal Simpsons plot, really. And after this story ends, we don't get a follow-up. So we don't know what happened to Flanders later on, but we do see where he does home improvement to his house after sending the aliens away and essentially makes his house into a castle. And then Homer says he wishes he still had the Paw. So yeah, overall, this one is a much shorter story. Again, it's much different from Obsession, Supernatural, Buffy, Fairly Odd Parents. Like, they're all the ones I've seen so far are very different. That's the only thing that confuses me about people that are constantly like, oh, this has been done before. Because I've noticed, like, all the plot devices and elements in these are kind of different. Like, they're similar. They all have the trope of either a wish, a spell, monkey's paw, whatever it may have you. But this one specifically really, I can see where Curry Barker got the idea for the One Wish Willow from the monkey's paw, but other than that, I don't really see much inspiration from this in the movie. Whereas with, like I said, with Supernatural, I definitely did. Like, I think some things actually lined up, like scenes almost one for one. So I'm still gonna have to stand on my previous video, my previous statements there. But I hope this video has proven to a lot of you guys that I am very aware of the other ones, and even the ones I haven't seen yet, I wanted to give them a watch and rank them and compare them against each other. I would still say Buffy's been my favorite episode out of the 3 I've watched so far. So yeah, that's all I really got for The Simpsons. Let's move on to the next episode. Next up, we got Season 3, Episode 1 from Tales of the Crypt, titled Love to Death. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say, this one is probably my second favorite out of the episodes I've watched so far. I really enjoyed this. It also gave me a reason to renew my Shudder account, which I haven't had since probably like 2021. So, I mean, that's pretty cool because I've been thinking about doing that for a while and I finally had an excuse to. So, essentially, it opens up with the Crypt Keeper telling us the premise of be careful what you wish for. Love can go wrong. So I think that was pretty cool having the Crypt Keeper introduce it. I assume that's the way that all of the Tales from the Crypt episodes open up. I haven't ever actually been able to watch it because it's notoriously never on any streaming services. So I'm definitely going to go back and watch some more episodes later. But moving on. It shows a normal family man seemingly coming home to his wife. And everything seems normal, right? And then she becomes overly infatuated with him after taking a drink and is essentially trying to rip his pants off. And we find out that was actually just a story, like a screenplay that's being written by the guy that's our actual character, Edward. Now, it shows Edward going down to the laundromat and he overhears a woman on the phone and sees the character that he created in her. He essentially hallucinates her as that. He proceeds to watch her undress, which, side note, I didn't realize that this show had nudity in it. But that kind of makes sense. Maybe one of the reasons why it's harder to get it on some streaming services, although a lot of shows do, but I don't know, like, I just, for some reason, wasn't expecting it in this show. I thought it was like more of a TV-14 type of thing, but I digress. The apartment owner tells him where to find the woman. He talks to the apartment owner essentially through a camera that's on the ceiling. He goes to her apartment, knocks on the door. She's on the phone, thinks he's like a package delivery man or something, but he lets himself in. There's a scene where he's looking at a poster of a movie she's done before, and of course he's infatuated with her, wants to get with her, and she kicks him out of the apartment, but then she opens the door and apologizes, said she's just been having it rough, and then essentially later on, he goes to her door with flowers, all dressed up, and he's excited about it. I'm just going to ask her on a date, but she isn't there, but we see her come up the elevator, and she's went on a date with somebody else. Obviously makes the guy very disappointed, but then I assume the next day they meet in the elevator, they go back to her apartment. He tries to talk her into dating, but she says that he essentially needs to be rich and famous first, and that they'll have a date at 8 whenever that day comes. Essentially saying right now, we're just not compatible. You're not in my lead. He hallucinates her as the character again, leading him to walk up to her and try to caress her, but then he gets beat out of the apartment because obviously he was hallucinating that and she didn't want to be touched. Later on, he goes to pay his rent to the owner, and the owner opens the door. And it's important to note that this owner is never seen. He's somebody that most of the tenants have never seen his face, only heard his voice, and they typically put the rent money under the door, which is what Edward goes to do. But then the door opens and he looks around, sees some pictures of women that unknown origins at the time, and then he goes up to the owner and he's talking to him, and essentially the owner tells him he can help him with his woman problem. And he offers him a potion in a bottle, and Edward takes the potion. Now, this guy has a very creepy demeanor. I wouldn't be taking shit from him. But anyway, Edward does. And so Edward puts the potion into a wine glass, and Miranda just drinks it. And at this point, she's still wanting him to leave. He went there saying he was going to make amends for touching her before. And then Miranda tries to call the cops, but becomes this overly infatuated, spell-stricken mid-call. Her expression changes, and she's just all over Edward. And essentially, they make love and wake up the next morning and do it all over again. And then while he's trying to write a screenplay, she's staring and making compliments about him, things that she would have never said before. She canceled an audition to be with him, which again, very unlike her character from what we saw before she was under the spell. And she won't let him write without wanting some type of sexual activity, as that's pretty much all she's driven to want to do. And he doesn't want it anymore and tries to run, but she really won't let him go until he decides to just hit her with a little pimp smack real quick, which was pretty interesting, honestly, because, you know, Bear wouldn't have done that for damn sure. That's one thing, a big difference between Bear and Edward in the stories, if we're comparing those two, is Edward is kind of not scared to, you know, do whatever he's got to do, but he was dumb for doing it to begin with. So, like, I still don't think he's much of a more redeemable character just because he's kind of more or less afraid, you know what I mean? He begs the owner to stop it. Like, he goes back in, begs the owner to stop it, but learns the lesson that the owner's whole goal is to teach men the hard truth by making them kill the women that they thought that they wanted so badly, but then they get driven to the point where that's their only option is to kill them, which is pretty much where Obsession came to in the end as well, as either Bear had to kill Nikki or just live with it and let it continue knowing what he knew. And unfortunately, he chose to just let it continue, and that movie played out the way it did. But this does not play out quite like that, because he's given a poison to kill Miranda and puts it in her champagne, but she switches the glasses and doesn't drink the one he put the poison in, essentially killing him. And so you think at first that he's in heaven and he's gotten away, and, you know, it's sad he died, sure, whatever, but at least he escaped Miranda. But then the twist at the end is Miranda actually killed herself by throwing herself out a window and essentially trapped him forever with her in some heaven type scape. But honestly, I don't think that's what this is. I think it's some type of purgatory type of situation that has something to do with the spell, something he can't escape unless she died, which he failed to do. And the way that she looked in the end really did remind me of Nikki's bashed face, like after she bashes her eye in. So yeah, honestly, I found another thing from this, like this episode has that part that could have very well influenced some of the effects done on Nikki, because the mannerisms are somewhat similar too. Nothing I would really look at and be like, oh, that's a direct connection. But there definitely are some similarities here. As far as comparing it to the other episodes, I guess the one it's closest to out of anything is probably the Buffy episode, being that they're both dealing with some sort of magic, but obviously both have way different implications, with the Buffy episode ending with no casualties. And, you know, this ended with essentially no good ending for anybody except, I guess, the owner, because he's just continuing business as usual. But like I said, I would put this probably second out of the episodes I've watched so far. And yeah, another really good example of the monkey's paw trope. Another earlier example of it too than a lot of these other episodes. I could definitely see the whole plot and premise of this really influencing Obsession and some of the other episodes as well, though, because the way that they did it is kind of reminiscent of it. You know what I mean? Like, It's not exactly the same. There's not any scenes that I was like, oh, this is nearly 1-to-1, other than the ending where, like I said, her appearance. Overall, I could see it. I could see where this got suggested to me to review it, and I'm glad I did, because now it's opened me up to the series again, and now I can actually watch it because I bought the subscription. So yeah, that's something I'm definitely gonna dive into. But hell yeah, man, let's get into the next one. So now we have season 1, episode 7 of My Babysitter's a Vampire, Smells Like Trouble. And in this episode, as usual, Benny and Ethan start off bantering about something, but they're bantering about getting girls, and Benny acts like Sarah. Now, side thing I want to say real quick, I absolutely love this show. I definitely have watched it in its entirety multiple times when it was still airing on, I think, Disney Channel back in the day, but I haven't seen it in a while because, as I found when I was trying to watch it, the only place to really watch it now is YouTube. Weirdly, you can watch it for free on YouTube, but as far as streaming, it's not really on anything, and I didn't even know it was on YouTube. So anyway, there you go. If you want to watch it, it's on there. But there's this really funny scene of the dad walking in there, like Ethan's dad, and he sees what they're doing, and that just creates like to me, just a really funny moment of him reacting to that and being like, whoa, what exactly is going on here, guys? And he offers them game tickets, which will come into play later. But essentially, they end up at school, and Ethan sprays down with like way too much cologne. Like, I think he was trying to kill himself, like choking on it or something. And then Benny decides he wants to up his chances of getting with Sarah, because that's who Ethan always wants to get with. And Benny finds a love potion, or a concoction in a book for a love potion, that he ends up making into a cologne. He drops some things into it, bada bing, bada bam, becomes a potion. And then Benny ends up tricking Erica, which is the one that he canonically always wants to get with in the show, into spraying it on her, because he disguised it as a dust cologne, which is something that this character's established to love, anything branded by that. And she sprays it on her, immediately activates it, and after that, the girls are just all over him. They're making compliments about him, like touching all over him. And it's just, obviously that's what the boys wanted. The spell at this point was working right. It did what they wanted it to do. Or not the spell, the potion. Let me not misspeak there, because there is a major difference between that. Because we do have some episodes with spells here. We have some with potions. But honestly, that's one of the only ways that the story really differs in a lot of them as far as the major plot of it. And Benny ends up dropping the potion because Erica tries to throw it to him. He fumbles with it, drops it, and it gets into the vents of the school and essentially affects like all the classrooms. And so now all the girls, unbeknownst to Benny and Ethan, are in love with them just like Sarah and Erica are. And they quickly realize this because they're sitting on a couch, and then girls come up to them and are talking to them and, not acting normal. And of course, they're in love with that idea at first. They're cool with it. And then Sarah ends up having a shrine of Ethan in her locker, which is one of the first indications that, yep, as usual, this is probably not going to go the way they want it to. And then we see Benny again, and he sent a bunch of flowers in class from the cheerleading squad. But then we actually see his teacher isn't under the spell originally, which is different, because I was thinking, okay, so is it a certain age range? Like only teenage high school girls can be affected by the spell potentially? But no, when she catches a whiff of him as he's leaving, she's shown to be affected, showing that any woman can be affected, just like a lot of the other plots. The boys are on top of the world with all of the girls loving them, making an entrance similar to Xander in Buffy, except they still like it at the time and are embracing it. But then Rory calls the grandma, and she's alerted to the spell, or she was not amused by it at all, of course. You can tell on her face, she's like, okay, I got to do something about this. But she actually just ends up telling the boys it's a bad idea, obviously. She explains that they'll all eventually hate them as much as they love them. And then she says that she's not really going to help them with it and just make them face their consequences, which honestly, fair. That's fair. We cut back to the school, and we see a girl. She's cool at first, but then she gets enraged out of nowhere and like throws a knife at a picture of Benny. And then we see all of the girls teaming up together, getting weapons to go to Ethan's house and I guess, kill the boys, which is crazy that that's normally the conclusion that these come to. Which before they can even be a threat, the girls' boyfriends show up to confront Benny and Ethan about stealing their girls, which, I mean, fair enough. Again, I can't really blame them there. But then, funny enough, they get them to leave by just offering them some sports game tickets, and they essentially say they can get new girlfriends, so whatever. Hey, we're going to the game. I guess respect-ish. So the girls end up getting into the house, swinging a bat at the boys. They surround the house where they have nowhere to go, or really just surround the porch. I guess they get ran out onto the porch and they're surrounded, have nowhere to really go until they both eventually make it off the porch. Benny jumps off earlier than Ethan. Ethan sits there and kind of jostles around for a minute, but eventually they both get off of the porch and escape for the time being. But then the girls are so enraged that they start fighting each other over Benny because I guess they couldn't get to him at the time, so they wanted to kill each other. I'm not really sure. But that's what happens there, and then Ethan ends up pulling up, and the girls don't want to fight each other anymore. But at that moment, Sarah and Erica show up and state that they're the only ones that can kill Benny and Ethan. So they start fighting these other two unnamed chicks. And so Benny and Ethan run away while they're fighting. And they essentially end up getting into a cage because they hear the fight ended. And they're like, oh shit, we got to take some cover. So they get into the cage, but then they're essentially surrounded like they're in a shark cage by all of these raging women. And essentially they just have to sleep in there all night, and then they wake up, and at that point the spell is wore off, the potion is wore off, and Erica and Sarah talk to him, and it's revealed that their grandma is also there, and they pretty much just punish the boys by making them wash the car, and the grandma just sitting there sipping a drink, and Sarah and Erica are loving it too, because, you know, they're all pretty mad about it, because it was a pretty dumb thing to do, I have to say. So, yeah, as far as comparison-wise, you know, I think this was pretty similar to a lot of the other plots. Like, I would say, I guess it's the most similar to Buffy. Once again, it's not really similar. I would say Tales from the Crypt was like a lot darker spin on it with a bit of a different ending. More similar to like Obsession, I guess. And then you have kind of the Buffy method where it's a school where all the girls get infected and all the women get affected, which it's a little different in Buffy because we're kind of told to imagine that the whole population is affected by it, which is a drastic difference versus just a school worth of people and a spell that has a temporary lifespan. But still, overall, I think this plot was, I mean, it was just pretty derivative, as much as I hate to say it, because I do love this show. I don't think they did anything awfully different with the concept. I mean, I still love the episode just because this series, I love all the characters in it. So I still don't think it's a bad episode or like just a blatant copy of anything. But as far as the main plot points, there's nothing really of note here to like edge it out above another one for creativity. So this one would probably sit like, it's definitely not beating out Buffy or Tales for me as far as like who did it best. And yeah, as far as comparison, I'd say it's pretty similar to a lot of other ones. Didn't really do much. So yeah, ranking lower, but I still love the episode just because of what show it is. And yeah, that's My Babysitter is a Vampire. Let's get on to the next one. So, I would never tell you guys a lie, so I'm gonna be honest, by this point in the video, I'm extremely fucking tired of, I've watched many things today, and my brain is starting to low-key get jumbled, so I wanted to try to make these last 4 as brief as possible, and just mainly touch on, like, how it connects, what's similar, but I have to keep going because we've reached the point of Season 1, Episode 31 of The Twilight Zone, The Chaser, which is one of the most commented things from the video I was referencing earlier that you guys wanted covered. So yeah, I watched it, and it's definitely the OG, man. It's the one that probably inspired like everyone that came after this. This came out in 1940 and follows a short story that came out, I think, a few years previous in a newspaper. But essentially, Roger Shackelford is the main guy here. He loves a woman named Leela to like a crazy degree, and she doesn't want any of it. He's hogging the phone booth, calls her, she hangs up on him. She don't even want none of it. She don't know who this dude is. But then he visits a professor, and they talk, which leads him to telling Roger that he can make love happen for him with Leela. And he gets the love potion from the professor. As usual, even given a warning that he shouldn't do it, he still does. And the potion, I can't say that this copied anything because this came out like before really any of the other ones we've covered. So I guess that was like the OG love potion right there. Probably not. I'm sure it was in mythology or something of that sort too. But regardless, first on screen example of it. And then Roger talks his way into Leela's room and is acting like a puppy, following her around. And then he slips the potion into her drink, which she just takes right down. And it honestly doesn't immediately hit her, but it soon does, and she changes her mind and tells him to stay. Now, one thing I did find really interesting here, there's a scene where she comes back to normal for a minute, kissing him, and asks what's happening, but snaps back into the trance real quick. And that really reminded me of Obsession, where Bear is, in the bed with Nikki, and she like jumps back. Or that happens a few times. That's like one of the most intense moments of it, where she snaps back into her real self for a minute before going back into the entity. So that really is another moment where I was like, whoa, that right there could have definitely been a direct inspiration. I mean, I'm not going to make any claims that anything was, but I could definitely see it. So that's something I had to point out. It shows her staring at him pretty much nonstop, you know what I mean? Like it's the trope nowadays, but this was, I guess different back then. She was sitting there just staring at him, and he leaves for an appointment, and she says that her love will only grow until he comes back. So that also reminded me of Obsession, like how when Nikki stayed in one place when Bear went to work. It's not quite to that degree, but it does have a similar vibe to it. And so it definitely does have a similar vibe to it. So I wanted to point that out. So that's two different things in this episode that I could definitely look at and say, okay, that might have also inspired Obsession, and also a lot of the other movies that came after it, because there's another thing that mirrors the Tales from the Crypt episode that I noticed. The glove cleaner is offered to Roger, which is basically just the poison from Tales of the Crypt, but it's like $1,000 one, which back in those days was like 10,000 of our money now. So that's like a really expensive thing. So like guy spends all his savings on it. And the glove cleaner is called the Chaser by the professor, which I thought was a clever way to tie into the title there. He slips the Chaser into her champagne, but then he ends up dropping the champagne after she tells him a story, or tells him an announcement that she's pregnant, I believe is what they were trying to get at there. And so he's essentially just stuck with her. He says he couldn't have went through with it anyway. And so, yeah, this episode, as far as like being wild and off the wall, it's not. It's very, very, very basic. But you got to remember, it also came out in 1940. Like, this is like the grandfather of literally everything else I've covered here. It's kind of funny. We covered the most recent example probably being My Babysitter's a Vampire. Or actually, no, Rick and Morty is going to be the most. Either way, yeah. You get my point. We covered a very recent example in My Babysitter's a Vampire versus a very, very old, the OG example, besides The Monkey's Paw and other short stories, the first on-screen example being Twilight Zone. So I can't really say, honestly, I'm putting this one at least in the, I don't know. I'm not really ranking these or doing a tier list or anything, but this is kind of like Not Duran Toten. If you're a Zombies fan, you'll get the reference. It's like, it's the original. So how do you really even rank it against the rest of them? It's like the inspiration. So yeah, props to this episode. Like I said, some similarities to like Obsession and Tales from the Crypt, and Buffy, like a lot of them, because they all use like a spell, potion, wish type of deal. So yeah, there you go. That's the OG right there. We got 3 more episodes to look at. Like I said, I'm low-key getting exhausted, but we got to power through this, ladies and gentlemen. If y'all still watching at this point, y'all some legends too, so let's move on to the next. All right, now we got season 1, episode 6, Rick Potion number 9 of Rick and Morty, which is a pretty much a parody of Love Potion number 9, which shout out a future video. Haven't seen that movie yet, but I definitely will before it's over with. So it starts out, Morty wants Jessica and tries to ask her out, but it bombs and he gets told off by a dude. Morty asks Rick to make him a love potion, and he refuses at first, but then he gives in and makes it for him, and it's like a toxin that makes people mate for life. It's meant for animals, or it's like an animal toxin, but essentially makes people like fall so in love that they just want to mate for life, and just, it's like an obsessive love. Like, this plot starts out very similar to many we've already covered, but man, does it go a completely different direction than anything I've covered so far due to the power of animation being able to do some crazy shit. But Morty rubs the potion onto Jessica and she instantly loves him, but then she sneezes into the dude from earlier and he also loves Morty now, because that's the thing. Rick didn't realize when he made the potion it was flu season, and that's how it's transmitted, is through like sneezes or coughs or like just bodily fluids, kind of like the flu. So, and it's a highly contagious virus. So now the guy ends up, he's getting dragged out of there, but he sneezes and causes the potion to affect the punch bowl and people that are standing around the punch bowl, and it gets in the vents, meaning that, as you know, with most of these stories, now pretty much everybody's getting affected. But, in some of the stories, it only affects like the local region that the spell's in. But, no. With this one, it's another one where the whole world's affected. So, and Jessica says she wants to mate with Morty in the middle of the dance. And then so does everybody. Everybody wants to mate with Morty. And then essentially Rick pulls up with the spaceship and they escape the mob by hopping in the spaceship. They dump an antidote out that is supposed to cure everybody, but it's mixed with praying mantis DNA. So it really just turns everybody into Cronenberg style monsters. And just a side note, Jerry fights some of them off. I'm really only leaving that in here to say that the family members aren't affected by the potion, so they're like the only ones that don't want to mate with Morty. It shows the whole world is affected in a clip on TV where it shows them in like the Middle East talking about Morty, and it's just causing destruction worldwide. We see that the town that Rick and Morty are from is absolutely destroyed. And then Morty drops a new antidote that's mixed with all kinds of crazy shit out the ship. But that seemingly turns people normal. But no, it did not. Because they turn into even crazier looking monstrosities because of all the different stuff that Rick mixed in there. And so at this point, Rick and Morty just sit on a rooftop and overlook the mess that they made, arguing where the fault falls, because honestly, they're kind of both at fault here. Rick takes them to an alternate universe where they had just died, and Morty absolutely freaks out, obviously, as you would. And then Morty just sits in shock, basically having to dispose of his own body, but he does it and they just slip into the new reality like nothing happened. But it does end with Morty being mortified, like he's just absolutely out of his mind, doesn't know what to think, as one would in this situation. But yeah, there's a hell of a lot of funny moments and plot points that I left out of that right there, just to keep it brief, like I said I want to do for these last few. As far as similarities, obviously the potion being a similarity, but other than that, this story is probably the most original out of all of them, just in Rick and Morty fashion, especially season 1, some of the best TV ever, like comedy-wise, animation-wise. So I'm not really surprised that I absolutely loved this episode in the way that it handled the premise, but yeah, definitely different, because at first it's crazy humans being obsessed, and then they turn into obsessed monsters, like true monsters. And basically destroy the world to the point where Rick and Morty have to jump to another universe altogether. So, yeah, that's a really, really crazy way to tell the story. And honestly, I'm probably, at least out of the 2 animated episodes, that's definitely number 1. I don't know if it's fair to rank it against, like, actual live action movies, but if I'm truly ranking them all together and having to just be subjective about it with my opinion, this is probably ranking close with Buffy as to what episode I enjoyed the most, because I've seen this before probably multiple times, but it's been years since I've watched season 1 of Rick and Morty, or Rick and Morty in general, honestly. So this was a really fun episode to watch. So yeah, we only got 2 more left now. I believe we got X-Files and Charmed left, so whew, it's been a long ride, but we're almost reaching the end. I got 2 more episodes to watch, 2 more to compare and review, so whew, let's get to it. All right, now we got season 7, episode 21, Jess Sweat, or I Wish, and this is X-Files, by the way. It starts out, now this was a 45-minute episode that I'm condensing down, so I'm not going to do a full plot summary, but just cover the main points, and I want to start off by saying this episode is honestly very different from any of the ones we've seen before, as this story is dealing with a genie, which is something we haven't seen yet. It's been wishes, potions, something of that sort up to this point. But it starts off essentially with a dude named Anson. He finds the genie in a rug, and then she disappears, and so does he. And then Anson's boss pulls up looking for him, and then all of a sudden he has no mouth, all right? Boss man goes to see the FBI, Agents Mulder and Scully. I hadn't actually watched X-Files in a very long time until this, so I had completely forgot like everything about it, so this is really a reintroduction to it for me. But so the agents see the genie without even knowing who she is yet when they go looking for Anson at his trailer, or his brother's trailer. And the agents see a picture of the genie from like way back when they go to search at the storage unit where Anson originally went missing. And then we find out that Anson has already wasted 2 of his wishes and only has 1 left, establishing the idea that this genie only grants 3 wishes. And then this dumbass uses his last wish to be able to turn invisible, and the genie even thinks it's dumb and is telling him it's stupid. But he turns invisible and he ends up loving it. So, I mean, whatever, I guess. But then dude decides he's going to go be a Casanova and gets struck by a semi-truck and dies. Then we see Scully painting the body that's invisible so she can see it, and she finds out that it's Anson. And obviously that raises some questions, because why the hell is he invisible? Then Anson's brother has it explained to him by Mulder that the genie is why his brother died. Once the agents catch on to the plot, you know what I mean? That's when they're explaining it to him. He hands over the artifact containing the genie originally to Mulder, or at least that's what we think. Or, well, it's pretty obvious to tell he wasn't going to give it to him, because this guy's like out of his mind, Anson's brother, that is. But Anson's brother gets the genie, and he gets granted 3 wishes as well. Scully invites some people, like researchers, to come see the body because it's an anomaly. She opens a door where it's supposed to be, and the body's just gone. She's shocked. Anson's back now because his brother wished him back, but he's basically just a rotting corpse sitting at the table, and obviously dude's creeped out by it. He says that's not what he asked for, but the genie argues that he didn't specify. And he uses his second wish to make him talk, but hilariously, he just screams, and that's all he does. He doesn't actually talk for a good while, it's assumed. But then he actually does start talking after a few more scenes back and forth between seeing the agents, and he's really angry that he got brought back. I mean, as one would be, because he's in a lot of pain. He's really cold. He can't feel his heart, yada, yada. And he ends up lighting a match and blows the whole damn trailer up right before his brother was going to use his 3rd wish. So, when he was finally going to wish for legs, which the genie tried to push him towards earlier, but he just wouldn't go for it. Again, these guys were made to be very dumb characters, Anson and his brother. The genie ends up getting interrogated, meaning I guess she's fireproof and can't be blown up. But yeah, Mulder is investigating her, or interrogating her, asking her questions about what happened, trying to figure out what her story is, I guess. And the genie basically explains that it's not her fault because everybody just has dumb wishes and never specifies, which is a good point. I mean, honestly, I feel like that's not a invalid thing to say because she claims she's not fully evil because the people basically do it to themselves. Now, while she could be, a little better about giving them what she thinks they're asking for, I think it is a good point to make that a lot of times when people wish for something, they don't really know what they're asking for, or they don't even know how it would really work. So, I mean, that's a good commentary they kind of threw in here. But Mulder actually ends up getting 3 wishes because he unrolled the genie, and they actually end up having some great conversations with each other. And Scully runs off at this point because she don't even know what to make of the situation. She still don't believe that it's a genie fully. But Mulder wishes for peace on Earth, but it ends up just being an empty world, which is technically not wrong. I guess that is peace on Earth, but not the way that he intended it to be. But he wishes for it to come back, but he's bitching out the genie, and his superiors pop up behind him, which I guess he wasn't expecting to happen. But I mean, you should have known when you wished the people back that there would probably have been people in that room when everybody disappeared. But anyway. So Scully explains to Mulder that maybe he shouldn't try to do a 3rd wish because it's dangerous, like he said himself, and it'd probably not go the way that he wants. But it seems like he's going to do it anyway. But then we see a scene of Mulder sitting with Scully on the couch and essentially tells her he didn't make the wish. He was going to, but instead he wished for the genie to be a normal person again. So he did use a 3rd wish, but he made it a happy ending for everybody. Now, what I have to say about this episode, where does it rank? I don't even think this is really, people did recommend it in the comments, that's why I threw it in here, but I don't really think this had much to do with any of the other episodes we've covered here, other than the wish gone wrong trope. I mean, it does fit in for sure, but I don't see any connection with it or necessarily inspiration from anything or for anything. This one is, I guess, more of an original story. There's definitely genie plots in other movies and other TV shows, but as far as if we're comparing all these against each other, definitely gets high up there on the originality scale. But as far as how they executed the concept, it had a very happy ending for everybody, other than the people that died, obviously. But those two, I think, were just destined to not do very great anyway because of their own minds. I don't really have much to say about this one. Shout out to y'all that wanted me to cover it though, because there you go. Cool little wish gone wrong trope, but different because of the genie being involved and being the one that's actually granting the wishes, and the fact that you get only 3, which I guess is kind of akin to Obsession where you only get 1 wish, versus a lot of these potions where it seems the reach can be potentially endless. So yeah, there we go, X-Files. On to the finally, guys, the last episode I have to watch. These videos are very fun to make, but this is definitely the longest I've ever worked on a video at once in a day, not including editing or anything, because if I haven't made it clear before this, I'm watching all these episodes back to back, recording my reaction directly after watching them so I can properly compare and see what they got going on. So yeah, bear with me if this last little bit or even the first little bit's kind of been jumbled. Trying my best here, being very expansive with the content, because I'm just wanting to really put a lot of my ideas into action and quit just thinking about things. But anyway, without rambling, let's get on to the last episode we're watching. Alright, so we finally made it to the last episode I had to watch, which was Season 2, Episode 22 of Charmed. Be careful what you wish for. Now, this one, just for a little bit of scene setting here, to give you some, reference of what the show even is. The main characters are witches, and the plot of this episode starts with essentially a warlock wants all witches dead. So they recruit a genie, him and the Council of Warlocks, to come after the sisters. I think it's Halliwell sisters or something like that. Anyway, so they open up the jar that's at the front door, the sisters do, summoning the genie. So now he's out of the bottle or out of the vase, whatever you want to call it. And then one sister wishes for her to feel love like it's the first time. but she doesn't realize that she's talking to the genie because he took over the dude she was having a lunch date with. Because the sisters know what the genie's up to, because they're also supernatural people, so they don't want to make the wishes, but they're essentially all tricked into it, because then another sister wishes a guy could move on from her, and it's granted unknown to her because the genie's hiding somewhere like off her field of view. And then after that, the genie has like a humility moment, or like a humanity moment, talking to the third sister, where he says he wishes he could have the little things and be human. That would be his one wish. But then he tricks her into wishing for a real power, which essentially sets him free, completes the 3 wishes he had to grant. And the guy that wished to move on, it's shown that he's taking a side job somewhere, which, like, out of state, which isn't too bad of a consequence for now, at least. You know what I mean? Because that, it always comes back, doesn't it, with these. The sister that wished for love to be exciting again turns into a teenager. The final sister gets a power, but it's infinite flight she can't control. She flies a dude to the middle of nowhere that broke into the house, and that's the warlock that wants him dead. A sister finds the genie and confronts him after that about the warlock, and he slips up about being hired by somebody. The genie does. And then the genie gets taken to the place he was at the beginning of the episode, where he's talking to the Council of Warlocks and claims that his plan will still work, but the Council doesn't believe him. Then he eventually convinces them, however. But then the guy who moved away, whose name is Dan, by the way, he shows back up looking like an old man, so much for not much consequence there. The warlock ends up going after the sister that's currently 17, because at that time she didn't have her power, so she's currently very weak. And then the 2 sisters get caught by a warlock and genie. The genie visibly feels bad about it, but the youngest ends up getting stabbed and killed, essentially, which I didn't expect out of a show like this, because it's actually rated PG, but they did shit different back in them days. But the 2 remaining sisters are obviously grieving when the genie comes back in and apologizes and explains that all he wanted was freedom. He was just doing a job. The genie offers to sacrifice himself, and does, by returning to his container, his bottle, bringing things back to normal, mostly, except for the fact that Prue, the sister that had been stabbed, is still dead, although she's returned back to her human form. But then they bring the genie back to do another wish. They pop him out the bottle again. Prue's brought back to life. And then the 3 sisters all team up to defeat the warlock, as I'm sure they do in many other episodes of the show. Unlike a lot of these series I've watched today, I have never in my life watched an episode of Charmed, I don't believe. The sisters choose to make the genie mortal with their final wish, which is very similar to how our last episode of X-Files we looked at ended. And then they also chose to use the third one, or like the one before the last one, to make the guy Dan forget everything that happened, essentially, so he's back to normal. So essentially at the end of this episode, everything went back to the way it was before the episode started, which is very much not what we can say for a lot of these other ones. I'm gonna be honest, I still think the strongest episodes I've watched today with the best plots have probably honestly been Tales from the Crypt. I really like that one. Really, really like the first one I watched, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. X-Files was cool. It was something different. I mean, obviously The Simpsons with the monkey's paw didn't have really much to go on there as a little 8-minute thing. Really everything I've watched today, like I said, I love Rick and Morty. I don't think I've really watched any bad TV episodes today. I will say, after watching all the ones I have, it was kind of a chore to sit through the last episode of Charmed that I just watched, because it was a 45-minute episode once again, so I ended it off with 2 very long episodes to watch, but that's okay, because I signed myself up for this. I wanted to do it, and I'm glad that I did. We finally made it to the conclusion. And yeah, in conclusion, a lot of these stories are very similar. A lot of them have borrowed from each other, but this has truly proven a point that I argued with a lot of people in that comment section, that you can do something different even given the same general premise. Because as I've seen with every episode I watched today, there's none of them that strike me as the same exact thing. A lot of them have very similar plot devices, very similar beats to them, but I would definitely not say any of them are directly copies of each other or super derivative of anything else. So yeah, maybe that's just me being like not as cynical about media. Like I just love creating things and I love watching things other people create. And there's like genuinely a lot of really bad shit out there. So I guess I'm just not as critical of things that at least have some redeemable factors to them. But yeah, with that being said, that's a review of 9 more episodes of, Wish Gone Wrong, Monkey's Paw trope episodes of television. I really have enjoyed responding to all the comments and reading all you guys' suggestions of shows and movies I should watch to do with this premise. If this video gets at least a couple hundred views, you know what I'm saying, I'm definitely going to make a video going over a couple different movies that use the premise as well, because I've gotten a lot of comments about those too. But yeah, man, much love to all you guys, especially if you sat through this whole thing. Y'all are fucking legends. Drop me a comment down below and let me know if anybody actually sat through the whole thing. And yeah, I'll see y'all in the next one, and make sure to come hang out again soon. And don't be making any dumb wishes.